thousands of aircraft on display. Feel the freedom with the whole family. Tickets are free for kids 12 and under, and they'll get inspired by hands-on STEM and aviation activity just for kids. Celebrate America this April in Lakeland, Florida. Get your tickets now at flysnf.org. That's flysnf.org.
Tune in to the Shrink and Wrap Show here on Tan Talk Radio. Our stories and our topics will include, but are not limited to, everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you. So again, don't miss us on Tan Talk Radio. Tune in again, Shrink and Wrap Show. We'll see you then.
The Shrink and Wrap Show at its new time, Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
You know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell.
You are about to enter the arena of real news and factual commentary on The Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Now, here is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
Yeah, that was U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who is a hypocrite on steroids, telling us the truth about Crooked Donald before executing a 180 and becoming Trump's primary ass kisser. The word disgrace doesn't even begin to describe this un-American, disgusting bucket of horse manure, such as today's Republican Party. A conglomeration of reprehensible, self-serving, Constitution-ignoring, milquetoast, Politburo seditionists. The few who actually care about the Constitution and law and order get voted out immediately. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, away they go. There's no place for anybody that respects the Constitution in today's Republican Party. I'm Ed Golly. With me in the Tan Talk studio, my two co-hosts, attorney and former circuit judge Kevin Carey.
Hello, Ed.
Hey, baby. Along with our Voice of Reason senior political analyst, also an attorney, Gary Gibbons. Gary?
Well, this where do you start with these people? Every day it's another disaster, but they love to smear people, right? And so yesterday they tried to smear Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, and they released some documents in an attempt to smear him in the investigation that he did. And he was one of those investigations was the classified documents that the president took and put in his bathroom down in Mar-a-Lago. And Judge Eileen Cannon, our favorite federal judge who shouldn't be on the bench,
The Trump Employee of the Month.
yeah, decided that, she was going to forever deep six and seal that report that Jack Smith created as special counsel, which is the requirement of the special counsel law. At the end, you write a report that says what you found. All right. She didn't want that to see the light of day because, of course, that would affect her ability to get appointed to, either the appellate court or the Supreme Court. I think that's what she's jockeying for. But Jamie Raskin, the congressman from Maryland, is an astute guy, constitutional scholar, and he noted that release of documents by the DOJ that was done to smear Jack Smith, first of all, violated Judge Cannon's order, probably, and secondly, it included a prosecutor's memorandum that suggested that there were documents that Trump took that only have, they are so classified that only 6 people in the government are allowed to see them.
One of whom is the president.
Yeah, but he was no longer the president at the time
Yes.
that he took them. Okay. And so there was a report that in this prosecutor's report that he had shown, they had evidence that he had shown a classified map only visible for 6 people in the government to others on a plane when he was flying to Bedminster, his golf course, one of his golf courses where he stored some of these documents as well. Um, and Susie Wiles, are now his chief of staff, was reported to have seen him showing this to other people, none of whom were the 6 that are allowed to see those documents. So again, we've got a serious national security problem with the people in this administration. They just don't seem to respect state secrets, and here we are in a time of war, and they are the sloppiest group of people we've ever seen, and there's spillover everywhere. Yeah, remember a few weeks ago we talked about the fact that the FBI had fired the people that are in charge of trying to investigate whether or not there's going to be a terrorist attack within the United States. And you compound that with the Republicans refusing for the 10th time yesterday to fund TSA. And make no mistake about it, this is the Republicans' fault. They control the federal government, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And so they have for 10 times in a row failed to fund TSA, and it's created a complete disaster at our airports, which, I maintain is another reason why he hasn't put ground troops in yet, because he doesn't need to. The airport debacle is the distraction du jour of the Epstein files, because nobody's talking about that, because they're talking about lines being 4 hours or 9 hours at one airport. And if remember, Colin Powell said, if you break it, you buy it. He's breaking everything, and we are all paying the price for that.
And you break it, you own it. Let me make a couple comments on some of your thoughts, Gary. The first, you talk about what happened, with our good friendly judge down in South Florida. One of the tragedies, the major tragedy of Trump being elected was we were seeing it. This is just the most tragic administration. But one of the parts of that is also tragic is people ignore what these felonies were. Beyond the fact that Trump was convicted of 34 felonies in New York, that case in South Florida was a rock solid case. And the fact that they would attack Jack Smith, he had a very strong case down there. I thought the case, the January 6th case, is very strong. And then there was the state case in Georgia, which all this attack on Letitia James up in New York, but on the prosecutor as well in Atlanta, that was a very strong case too. But the points you're mentioning were all relevant to that prosecution in South Florida. He would have been convicted. What Trump got was a get out of prison card in that election. He would be in prison right now. So everyone seems to forget that. I mean, the thought too that an election also drives the Department of Justice to say, well, that case we're just going to dismiss it. It just goes away. To me, there's something wrong with that. There should be an independence from the executive branch and the DOJ saying, we're not going to just drop this case because now the defendant happens to be president of the United States. That's not what our Constitution provides for.
And the logic that didn't follow was that he asserted he declassified all these documents, which, number one, shows his contempt for the nation's secrets. Now we're beginning to see that it was probably done because of some kind of business arrangements. He could make money by having these documents and exploiting them. He couldn't tell you what's in more than probably 3 or 4 of them. He wouldn't read those documents and determine they should be declassified. And besides, one president doesn't declassify them. It goes through a process that involves a lot of people, primarily probably in the military or in the CIA. But even if he did declassify them, it still doesn't give him ownership of the documents. They still belong to the government. The Resolute desk is not a classified desk. He can't just load it on a truck and take it away with him whenever he leaves the White House. Those are government property that he stole, and they had him dead to rights when they got it. Now they're saying, well, the FBI is the bad guys because they actually went in and got the property that he had stolen from the government.
Well, you're right. And not only did he steal them, when they said give it back, he said, F you. Yeah. They did. If you look at the history of what happened down in South Florida with that very cavalier and as you said, Ed, just very loose access to that documentation. And I do think, by the way, based on Trump's proclivity toward just maximizing profit, he did use that as with their financier to gain access to other information from other countries, and I think it was a security violation. But I hope that when the House takes over after November, there still are hearings about those allegations. The fact that the case went away doesn't mean that wrongful conduct didn't go away, and there's never been a proper airing of what he did down there, and what he did was criminal and should not. The fact he's not prosecuted now should not mean it should not be investigated.
Well, the motive of why he did it was not an element of the crime. And the crime is, if you take these documents, you've committed the crime. And we don't need to know why you took them. But Jack Smith's team, when they were looking at it, they recognized that they were going to have to present this to a jury. And juries want to know why somebody did something. You know, it's just human nature to try to think about that, whether you need to think about that in the context of a conviction or not. And so they started looking at the particular documents that were taken, and they realized that a lot of them had a relationship to his personal business ventures. And so they think that he stole them because he was going to use them for his own personal business after he left office. And that's why he didn't want to give them up. And so that's what Jamie Raskin was talking about, you know, to Pam Bondi. Wrote her a letter and said, you know, we really need to know more about this because it looks like this guy is, you know, completely violating federal law still. And had tried to get away with using stuff to enrich himself. Duh, that's what he does every day when he's in the Oval Office.
All you need to know that there's no boundary between the White House and Department of Justice is that William Flynn, who pled guilty to a serious felony and lasted about 10 minutes in the administration back in 2016, 2017, then has the gall to sue the Department of Justice, who then pays him $1.2 million for the fact that he pled guilty to a serious felony. What about that has any sanity? What was wrongful about that? He pled guilty, and somehow the Department of Justice, which is just an arm of the White House, says, okay, we'll pay you over $1 million for your felony conduct. And no Republican or MAGA person might agree that that's a problem. It just goes by the board. It's in the newspaper as if it's the weather.
Yeah, it's a settlement. You know,
correct.
A real Department of Justice would say, okay, you want to sue us for that? We'll take it to trial and see what a jury says about whether you should get a penny.
But how do you file a lawsuit?
They went, no, here we go. We'll give you $1.2 million.
But Gary, as a lawyer, how do you file a lawsuit based on conduct you pled guilty to? How does that, in any sense of reality, there's no cause of action there, but they know, just like Trump, who's seeking billions of dollars again for his criminal conduct. Well, we don't care about that. This is never going to go to a jury. We'll get the flunkies in the DOJ to settle the case, just like what happened with Flynn.
Yeah, it's as if the Flynn team just sent an invoice to the DOJ and said, hey, you want to pay this? And they said, sure, why not?
Yeah, it's the taxpayers' money, not ours. But doesn't all this really point to the SAVE Act, which is what is holding up the funding for the TSA, which is the effort by the administration now to intimidate voters so that the Democrats will not get in control of Congress? Because if they take control of the House, and even with or without the Senate, they are going to be impeaching Trump every week for all the myriad of crimes he's committed against this country. It's their responsibility and obligation to do that. And so the desperate effort that he's making is what this SAVE Act is, which I think they should call it the Voter Suppression Act of 2026, the VSA Act, because that's really what it is. And that's what's tying up funding for TSA. They can independently fund the TSA and put the airports back in business, but he won't do it because he realizes the more pain he causes, the more likelihood somebody will cave and go ahead and vote for the SAVE Act, and then they can intimidate enough voters to keep control of Congress.
Well, it's interesting. John Kennedy from Louisiana spoke yesterday or the day before about, there was an agreement with the Democrats that they took to Trump, which would be separate out the funding for ICE, which
on Sunday, they took it to him.
Well, I mean, how do you defend the ICE conduct? And so the point I think Kennedy was making, and to some extent I thought throwing Trump under the bus, was suggesting that this was a reasonable agreement, and we would separate it out and get the funding going. They're missing their third paycheck tomorrow, by the way. And it's ironic, too, at the airports, you've got ICE who's being paid $50,000 bonuses and just let the good times roll, basically doing nothing at the airports. And yet, although watching the unpaid TSA workers continue to work, the ones that haven't had to go take another job to feed their families. But Trump, in response to the Kennedy proposal, just said no. He's like a child. If you don't go, as you were saying earlier, Ed, and you were talking about some of these folks that have left, if you're a Republican, you don't just drink the Kool-Aid. He wants no negotiation. And he thinks if I impose enough pain here, that it's going to fall back on the Democrats, but it's not going to, because as you said, the Republicans control, all aspects of government right now.
Yeah. And when it was Ted Cruz and John Kennedy and even Thune went to the White House and said, we have this deal and we'll deal with funding the ICE separately with a reconciliation bill that we can get passed without the Democrats. So just, pay TSA, get those people back to work, and then we can deal with this. And we won't give the Democrats what they want. We won't, bend the knee on any kind of reform of ICE. We can take care of that on the side. And that's when Trump said, no. Unless you do the SAVE Act, I'm not going to sign it.
Well, Ted Cruz and John Kennedy are the voice of reason. That there's a real problem
You're in big
there.
trouble.
That's exactly right.
Trouble.
Well, I think Anna Luna is getting a little nervous about losing her seat here in the 13th district, especially if you read the commentary she had published in the Tampa Bay Times today, where she is trying to gin up support for the SAVE Act with a bunch of utter, total nonsense, claiming that Americans have all lost confidence in the election system. She says a poll shows that 72% have lost trust in the election process. I don't believe that.
She made that up.
Yeah, I think she did. She says, and she's asserting that there's no voter identification required now. Like anybody just walk in off the street and vote. We always show identification. We always register. And then she says, well, we're finding in a couple of states, she says that there were people who were registered to vote who aren't citizens. Well, if you found them, then you don't need to pass a new law to find them because you can do it, right?
Right.
And so she's making the claim that this is essential. But remember, Chris Krebs, who worked for Crooked Donald in the 2020 election, looked at the election process and said it's the cleanest election we've ever had. And
that got him fired.
Promptly, yeah.
Can't speak the truth to this administration. Well, Ed, the SAVE Act is dead on arrival. I don't know why they're wasting time on this. It's not going to go anywhere. They're not going to. They certainly don't have the votes to override the, overcome the gerrymandering. I'm thinking about gerrymandering, but the what's the term for delaying? Filibustering.
Yeah.
The filibustering. So it's never going to pass. We have a problem we talked about last week that the state legislature and the state, in Florida, we're just another arm of Trump. We've got the same problem with the state statute in Florida. But on the national level, it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm not sure why she's wasting capital, other than the fact I think you're right. She's very concerned based on what's been happening in these recent Florida special elections as to what she's going to do.
Tootin'.
Well, the Florida statute that is the SAVE Act, essentially, that we're going to have, doesn't take effect for the midterms. It
Correct.
takes effect January 1. So,
well, that also gives some time for litigation to gear up to attack that act.
The Brookings Institute reported in 2025 only about 4 cases of mail fraud occur per 10 million mail-in ballots. To put that in numbers, that's 0.001 0.00043% of the total mail ballots cast. But Republicans are using the idea of voter fraud to argue for measures that could toss more than 21 million Americans off the voter rolls. Bill Barrow of the Associated Press reported Wednesday that Crooked Donald voted by mail in Tuesday's election in Florida. The spokeswoman for the White House, Olivia Wales, explained Trump's position, saying that the Save America Act has common sense exceptions for Americans to use mail-in ballots for illness, disability, military, or travel, but universal mail-in voting should not be allowed because it's highly susceptible to fraud. When this law fails to get passed, I think Crooked Donald's desperation to get his lackey Republicans to vote for Voter Suppression Act, he implores them to do it in the name of, well, you won't believe it. Listen.
And I'm requesting that the Republican senators do that immediately. You don't have to take a fast vote. Don't worry about Easter going home. In fact, make this one for Jesus, okay? Make this one for Jesus. That's what I tell them.
But the whole idea is we're seeing now that ICE agents are going to be posted at polling places to intimidate voters. But you can't intimidate a voter who mails their ballot in, right? Well, they just put it in the mailbox and they're done. But if you walk up to the polling place and you see 4 or 5 of these ICE Gestapo goons armed, standing next to the paddy wagon with the door open and the motor running, and you happen to be brown or a minority person, you're going to think, well, they're going to snag me and throw me in there even if I show identification, because well, we're not sure, that looks like fake ID to me, we better check it out. Lock them up for a week, and by the time they get out, it's too late to vote. And we know this is how they're going to attempt to engage in voter suppression. In their own words, Mark Wayne Mullen, who just got sworn in as the director of the agency now in place of Barbie Noem, would not deny that that these guys may be present. He would not state outright that no, ICE will not be there. And what business do they have being there? Elections are run by the states, not the federal government.
Exactly.
Now, we know our crooked governor doesn't give a damn about the law, so he's going to say, oh, that's fine here in Florida. We'll allow federal agents to come in and monitor our polling places if it'll help Republicans win.
You see, by the way, this week that Trump said there might be a place for DeSantis in his administration, that he's a lame duck governor. So, he's going to be kissing Trump's ass for the next 2 years to get a nice job in the administration.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the challenge that I've noticed, and I've kind of given up trying to talk reason to these MAGA people, is when you claim there are these problems about fraud, whether it be in mail-in voting or in, that aliens are voting, which just isn't true. You have the data. I mean, we have the data to back up the fact that these are not problems. They don't want to hear it. They do not want to hear the facts.
It's the Joseph Goebbels problem. What he said back in World War II is if the lie is big enough and you tell it more often enough, people will believe it, whether it's true or not.
Well, we're going to talk more about this at length in the second hour of The Voice of Reason today. I want to talk a little about the war in Iran, which is apparently not a war by definition, but it is if you're standing under the bomb when it lands. And if you think that too is a distraction from either the Epstein files or any of these other crimes that Trump is committing, that because as we all know, Congress is required to approve this type of an action, and they weren't even consulted. Same thing, just like with the tariffs. That's the domain of Congress. Trump completely ignored it and just went ahead and imposed it. He has no respect for the Constitution.
Well, if you had a guide of how not to start a war, for example, there's no imminent threat. They haven't gone to Congress. They haven't gone to the allies, as we talked about last week. There's been no support. They've been completely disrespected by Trump. So why would he think they'd join in this illegal war with a company or a country that Iran? Does Trump think this is just going to go away?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what, the foundation of this hatred that Iran has toward us is, to me, it seems like it's just totally misunderstood and misrepresented. people don't just inherently hate other people. I mean, I get racism can cause that, but for one country to just decide they hate the people of another country, it doesn't naturally happen. There's always a foundation for it. And so why does Iran run around yelling death to America? Well, it didn't start in 1979 when they took over the embassy and held these guys hostage. There was a reason for that, just like there was a reason for 9/11. It didn't just happen. It happened because they feel that they have been economically essentially raped or oppressed by our country in the past, and they don't forget about it. Daniel Immerwahr wrote an article in the New Yorker that spells it out very clearly. He says, the seeds were planted in the 1950s when Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh made headlines by nationalizing Iran's oil. Now, he was democratically elected. And we beat our breasts and say, we're going to go around the world and promote democracy, unless it doesn't meet or serve our interests, right? The profits from the oil industry in Iran back then were still going to the United Kingdom, to Britain. In fact, in 1952, Time magazine named Mossadegh its Man of the Year. The British wanted him removed, but Eisenhower saw him as popular, a Western-educated liberal who was friendly to the U.S. and a hopeful figure. It was only by appealing to wider concerns to the global chessboard that the British brought Eisenhower around, fearing that Mossadegh might inadvertently destabilize Iran, which would then provide the Soviets an opening, the Cold War well underway by that time. So Eisenhower okayed a coup in 1953. Our CIA went in, took him out of the picture. They didn't assassinate him, but they brought in the Shah, who was a brutal dictator to that country, so that he would continue to sell us their oil at a discount price. And that's where it all started. And that's why they ended up taking over the embassy, where you remember the Shah ended up with cancer, and Jimmy Carter let him come to this country. And it was contentious, but he said, yeah, you can come here to, I think, Boston to get your cancer treated. And once he was gone, the population rose up against us and him, and then put the exactly. Yep. And that's where it really all started, because of this, the arrogance that this country has, that we just have some kind of inherent right to go in and get other people's resources. I mean, that's what colonialism is all about, right? That's what happened in Vietnam when the French went in to get the rubber. And then Ho Chi Minh says, I want you guys out of here. If you want rubber, pay retail like everybody else, but you can't exploit us. And that led to the Vietnam War. And what we did to Mossadegh is what led to where we are now. Meaning, if we just have free market operations around the world, nobody would hate us. Nobody'd have reason to hate us, right?
Well, less reasons.
So here we are.
Us.
Okay, I'll buy that. Fewer reasons to hate us.
Well, I keep repeating myself, but I don't see where this is going to go. I mean, Trump gets up there every day, as does your buddy Pete Hegseth, and talk tough. But where's this going? You're going to have. He wants $200 billion more dollars. He's now talking about boots on the ground. There's talk about a army unit actually on its way to Iran, none of which is popular. You've got a president who's at an all-time low. I saw a poll number of 36% yesterday, but it's like going down this track, completely ignoring what the reality of what the people want to do. And I mean, they're going to get what's going to happen. And I agree with you. This is all about voter suppression, but every election, and we're going to talk about the latest elections in a few minutes in Florida, but the voters don't want this. And I'm sure some of these people, we've talked about Kennedy and even, our buddy out of Texas, Cruz, they have a political issue, as does Thune, because this country doesn't want this war. It can't afford this war. But there's nothing that we're fighting for in Iran to say, well, at some point they would have come against us. And this is the first president who had the, to do something. That's not a strategy. And there's no strategy. There's been no press conference saying, here's our strategy. There's no end game here. And even if you destroy their ability now, what are you just going to continue to monitor this? These people you're talking about, they don't. It's religious zealousy, it's hate that's been driven by many, many years of reality, and it's not going to change by tough talk and a few bombs that have occurred in the last few weeks.
And now we're looking at Cuba as the next distraction. Well, we're actually implementing an embargo on Cuba so they can't get oil, so that we can point to their government and say, see, their government is a failure. Well, think about this. What if Florida got embargoed? What if we couldn't bring any oil in from anywhere? How long would our economy last? We don't produce any oil in this country. What if we couldn't sell our beef or our produce to anybody? What if tourists couldn't come here from any part of the country and we couldn't trade with them? How long would it be before Florida's economy collapses? I mean, we have a little bit of manufacturing, but it's not significant. And if we couldn't sell whatever we manufacture to anybody other than somebody within the state, then we'd be pointing at capitalism saying, see, capitalism doesn't work at all. Look what's happened to Florida. We'd all be living in poverty. So we're creating the failure of the system there. And so that we can now say we got to go in and rescue these guys. If we would just normalize trade, they'd be doing fine. They have products to sell in Cuba, whether it's tourism or tobacco or sugar. They were doing fine.
The rest of the world is looking at the madman in the White House, and they're saying he wants to run Venezuela, he wants to run Cuba, he wants to run Iran, and he can't even run the airports in his own country.
You are exactly.
And the hell with Ukraine. He was talking about Ukraine.
Yeah.
That war continues, and we keep kissing Russia's ass, giving access to information that's then used against us. Does anyone care about Ukraine anymore?
I do.
I hope somebody does, but
do.
Again, Trump is like a child who has no attention span. He has none. So he goes from this to this to this, and the challenge is no one around him is there as a guardrail. That, thank God, there were few back in the first chapter of Trump. But it's just they're going to get hammered in November. They can try all they can, but the beauty of a democracy is they are going to be accountable.
Well, you're listening to the Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. I'm your host, Ed Golly. My co-hosts are attorney and former circuit judge Kevin Carey and attorney Gary Gibbons. We're going to take a quick break here. And when we return, we're going to talk about the assault on green, clean energy in this country, what that is all about, along with more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
Are you a writer, inventor? Do you have questions about your intellectual property rights? Well, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 11 o'clock for Joy on Paper. Once a month, I will have a special guest, the writer's legal eagle, Bill Larson of Larson & Larson, who can answer your questions. Protect your valuable work. Email me your questions to patsy.radio@gmail.com and then listen in every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. right here on Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network. That's patsy.radio@gmail.com.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Tune in to the Shrink and Wrap Show here on Tan Talk Radio. Our stories and our topics will include, but are not limited to, everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you. So again, don't miss us on Tan Talk Radio. Tune in again, Shrink and Wrap Show. We'll see you then.
The Shrink and Wrap Show at its new time, Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. And now it's time for the Only a Conservative Could Think It Minute with your host, Ed Golly.
That sound you hear is the collective giggling of the 1.3 million Americans who bought an electric vehicle last year. They don't need to look up where the Strait of Hormuz is on a map. They can cruise by the gas station and pity the poor schmucks who are paying even more per gallon. Only problem is, there should be more of them. But the crooked Donald administration and the Republican-led Congress decided to shift course and unplug the electrified economy just as it was beginning to juice up. So instead of joining the rest of the world in the race for affordable, renewable energy, they hit the brakes on subsidies for electric vehicles, heat pumps, and wind farms, and tore up regulations on oil drillers and old-fashioned gas guzzlers. Crooked Donald crowed at the State of the Union 4 days before the first bombs dropped on Iran, quote, "Oil production is up by more than 600,000 barrels a day. I kept my promise to drill, baby, drill, unquote. But evidently, our exporter status means little when the price you pay at the pump is dictated by a global market sputtering in a chokehold. Only a conservative would think this is really energy independence. Think about that.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Speaking of liquid gold, Trump asserted that he knew the price was going to go up when we invaded Iran. But why didn't he tell us that before it all happened? You know, I could be the world's best weather forecaster if I always tell you what the weather's going to be yesterday, right? He didn't know. It's like you said, even if people warned him, he just thought, well, that's not going to do well for me, so I'll just ignore it, just like he did with the coronavirus. You remember how he dealt with that? Oh, it's all going to just magically disappear. There's nothing to worry about.
Oh, Iran won't close the Strait of Hormuz.
No,
they didn't do it when we bombed them last time. They won't do it this time.
Mm-hmm.
How naive.
His enablers put him he's in a bubble. He's in this bubble just like he was with the pandemic when he had no idea what was going on. You know, the scientists behind him just embarrassed to be behind him. He's talking about Clorox and other things. But he has no idea what the public wants now. That he doesn't understand the affordability issue, the property insurance issue, the tax issues. These people now are seeing $4 for regular gas. You think they're happy right now? We're going to talk about in a few minutes what happened in Florida in these elections. They're not happy. You know, Trump can continue to bloviate all he wants, but they're going to pay a serious price for this come November.
It's going to be the ripple effect of all of this, the domino effect of the closing of the Strait of Hormuz is going to be huge in everything that we buy because shipping charges are going to go up. Mm-hmm. All the trucks that deliver all the goods to people in the United States. We're going to have, I was looking yesterday, our office building in Tampa, where my law firm is. I looked at the electric bill yesterday. And there are separate line items for things. And one that TECO passes through to you is a fuel surcharge.
Whoa.
So that's going to be whatever the price of the fuel is going to go up on your electric bill. This month, the fuel charge was $863.53 for that office building. Multiply that across everybody that lives in the city of Tampa and all that. It's going to hit everybody's pocketbook in ways that they had no way of even understanding could be possible.
Not to worry, Gary. For Christmas, I'm going to get you a set of whale oil lamps that you can use in the office, and you can just unplug and go. I mean, because that's what we're doing is we're keeping this country tied to 20th century technology and fossil fuels. There was a French company still there. It's called Total Energies, and they acquired some leases when the Biden administration was in control to build a couple of wind farms off the coast of New York and the other off the coast of North Carolina. But on Monday, the Trump administration announced it's going to pay $928 million in taxpayer money to buy those leases back so they won't build the wind farms. Our Interior Secretary is Doug Burgum. Here's what he said. I'll quote him. "The era of taxpayers subsidizing unreliable, unaffordable, and unsecure energy is officially over, and the era of affordable, reliable, and secure energy is here to stay," unquote. To me, that's exactly backwards. He didn't offer any solution to how we're going to deal with energy issues when all the fossil fuels are exhausted. North Carolina Governor John Stein countered. He says, quote, "Our state has the offshore wind potential to power millions of homes with renewable American-made energy. It's ludicrous and wasteful that the Trump administration is spending $1 billion in taxpayer money to pay off a company to stop it from investing private dollars to create the clean energy we need."
This Trump, I'm going to respond to that briefly. This Trump cult creates chaos. And because of that chaos, you need to step back and see what's happening because they create so much chaos, they hope you ignore it. we talked about, and there are two things here that are just flat out corrupt, and one of them you just mentioned, but the first one was I wanted to reiterate is, okay, so if we're all convicted felons because we own the DOJ, let's go sue the DOJ for our criminal conduct and get paid for our criminal conduct. There's nothing about that makes any sense. Let's talk about what you just mentioned. That was in response to these federal courts saying, no, Trump administration, you cannot stop these projects, these wind projects off the East Coast. So in response to that, where the federal courts are saying you can't do this, well, let's buy off the plaintiffs. Let's buy off these companies by tax money. I mean, you talk about corruption. So we can't win in the courts. It's the same kind of just arrogant behavior. Let's take tax money to pay these people off because we can't win in court. The courts are telling us what we're doing is flat out illegal. So in response to that, we're going to pay them off. We're going to basically bribe them.
And if you're the French company, what are you going to do? You're just going to set a ridiculous number higher than what you would ever expect anybody to pay and see if they'd pay it. And guess what? They did.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not just us radical pinko liberal commies that think we should have green energy. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse explains why the Trump administration is taking us in the wrong direction.
The Trump administration is 3 for 3 going in the wrong direction, creating scarcer, more expensive, heavily polluting energy. Are they stupid? Or is something darker going on? Well, if you're a utility customer, you'd better get the joke because the joke is on you. Every time the Trump administration's fossil fuel goons stop or slow a clean energy project, the grid must turn instead to expensive fossil fuel plants. They're more expensive and they drive up the grid price, so your electric bill goes up. Here's the punchline. Where does all your money go? It goes to the owners and fuel dealers of those expensive, polluting fossil fuel units. It's billions of dollars pumped from consumers' pockets, your pockets, to Trump's big, crooked fossil fuel donors. It's corruption, plain and simple, and you.
Yeah, let me talk about that bill that I mentioned at our office. Listen to all the different things that the utility charges are comprised of. The basic daily service charge is one line item. Billing demand charge is the kilowatt hours piece of it. There's a separate energy charge. Who knows what that is? There's a separate fuel charge that I mentioned was over $800. The capacity charge, what's that? How about the storm protection charge? An energy conservation charge, a clean energy transition mechanism charge, a storm surcharge, and a Florida gross receipts tax charge. And that's before you get to a franchise fee charge, a municipal public service tax, and a state tax. All of those go into creating what your electric bill is. And those are totally, off the rails in terms of no oversight by anybody in the state of Florida. And here we are, we're ramping that up across the nation by all these utility companies that are going to be forced to use fossil fuels as part of how they generate their power plants.
Yeah, and good luck going to the Public Service Commission to get relief from them. All these appointed, it's no longer elected as it used to be. There's no accountability by the Public Service Commission, and they're all appointed by DeSantis, and they're not going to give any relief.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, so there's no accountability, and I don't know what. All I know is that my bill keeps going up and up, as you're saying. And we had a campaign based upon affordability, and Trump saying, "I'm going to bring your prices down in 15 minutes," which is absurd. But nothing he does is in favor of less cost to the consumer.
Yeah, our energy bills were going to be half by this time, 18 months at the outset.
Contrast that with my home that I have solar panels on, and I have a charge that Duke Energy makes me be connected to the grid. I create all the energy that I need from my roof. And so my bill is that mandated charge from Duke of $35.71.
Ed, I've shared, James Carville is one of my favorite commentators, and he's still quite a bit on YouTube. But he reacts. People tell him that you've got this Trump derangement syndrome, and I don't know if he's getting more and more. Look, I do have that. This guy's insane. And he talked about. Do you remember the movie Catch-22?
Oh yeah.
Talked about people in the Army. This guy said, "I'm going to go to the doctor and say I'm insane, so that they can kick me out of the Army." And he goes to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist says, "Look, if you think this war is, if you're sane in this war, then you're insane. So the fact that you're insane and seeing this war as horrible keeps you sane. So you can't go anywhere." The point being, what we're seeing is insanity. So for them to say, "Oh, you've got this Trump derangement syndrome," these are factual, corrupt actions we talk about week after week. And each one of them is wrong. And for us to ignore them would be insane. So we have to keep making these points.
And if we nationalized the electric utilities and the oil companies, our prices would probably go down 20% because their position would be, their answer to you would be, if we don't make a profit and go out of business, your lights are going off. What do you want to do? So the Public Service Commission says, well, whatever you need to have your profit and to pay your stockholders and to pay your CEOs the obscene salaries, we're going to make the ratepayer pay. But if it's nationalized, you don't have that. You don't have that situation with the water company here in Clearwater. You turn on the tap, the water always comes on, but you're not paying stockholders for it. So you get the water at the cost of producing it and a reasonable salary to the people who make it work. If we did the same thing with the oil company, there'd be no way to bribe people like Crooked Donald so that he takes us in the wrong direction of using more instead of less oil. What do you think?
Well, the investor-owned utility companies that we have in Florida bribe the legislature, and they control everything that comes through the legislature. So it's really the worst, and including the fact that Florida law allows the utility companies to get a guaranteed rate of return on their investments that they make, so that it's guaranteed that we're paying the profits to these shareholders. It's outrageous.
Yeah, they have the best of all worlds. They're profit generated. Their profits are off the charts, and they've got regulators who rubber stamp anything that they do, and yet they're compensated for bad decisions. They make these decisions and have these plants that go nowhere, these nuclear situations, and they don't suffer the price for it. So it's government subsidized. They can't lose.
Yeah,
they can't lose.
Duke Energy went to the Florida legislature. They wanted to build a nuclear plant up in Levy County after they broke the one in Crystal River, and so it's like, well, we can't fund this ourselves, so let's allow us to surcharge our customers in advance of building it. And they collected $3 billion and then decided not to build the plant. Did they ever refund the money? Were they required to refund the money?
Sounds
Hell no.
like the tariff issue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, before we all decide to commit suicide, let's let Jimmy Kimmel weigh in on events of the day. Go ahead, run it.
Brought to my attention today that we're the only country that does mail-in voting. Mail-in voting means mail-in cheating. I call it mail-in cheating.
That's right. He prefers in-person cheating, preferably with a porn star shortly after his wife gives birth. And he keeps saying, it was brought to his attention today that we're the only country that does mail-in voting. When is somebody going to step in and tell him that is not true? 34 countries have mail-in voting. All the countries that have mail-in voting. So here's where the real magic comes in. That was yesterday. Guess what he did today? That's right. He voted by mail today for the special election in Florida. He's unbelievable. Donald Trump claiming he wants to protect election integrity is like Bill Cosby telling you he'll watch your drink for you. Next, we're going to find out that his blow dryer is powered by a windmill or something. You know, I mentioned this last week, and now it is official. The Trump administration is shelling out $1 billion of our money to a French energy company to cancel construction of wind turbines in North Carolina and New York. He's paying this company to not build these renewable energy farms because he has this weird hatred of what he calls windmills. He says they're unsightly, they're ugly monsters, they're losers, a con job, they're bad for the environment, and they make a lot of noise, which is exactly how most of us feel about him.
He mentioned that, as correctly, that Trump voted by mail. There were 3 special elections in Florida this Tuesday, just 2 days ago, including that's House 87 in Palm Beach. That was an area where Trump won by 11 points. That area, and that was a Republican held that seat, and a Democrat won that seat.
Emily Gregory.
Yes, who's a first timer came in, and so that seat was flipped. And then there's a Senate 14 seat here in the Tampa Bay area, also a Republican seat. The Republican, it was open, became lieutenant governor, and a state rep from Polk County decided she'd move to Tampa and run for the Senate. Lost that seat. Again, that was a seat that was 7 points in favor of the Republicans when Trump won it. An unknown won that seat. And so, and then there was a third election where the Republican won. What's incredible is since Trump has been in office, those two are the 29th and 30th state seats in this country that have flipped from Democrat to from red to blue, from Republican to Democrat. 30 seats have flipped. You know how many seats have flipped from red to blue?
Not one.
0.
Right.
Not one seat in this country has flipped from
blue to red.
From blue to red.
Yeah.
But I apologize if I flipped it. But 30 now, including these two Tuesday, where both those, if you look at elections and get away from all this puffery, those are seats that you had no question the Republicans are outfunded. The one in Tampa was a 3-1. You had a candidate who had been was a state representative.
She outspent him 15-1. Jeez, 15-1.
They put major money into that. They had a much better ground game, and yet they lost. So there, what I said to some friends of mine who are Republican MAGAs is, if you don't think that's the canary in the coal mine moment, you're not focusing on what's happening. Those are seats that by no means should have been picked up by Democrats.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that there's the registration in both those areas were heavily favored for the Republicans.
22,000 more Republicans were registered in that district. And so the only way that he could win by 400 votes was to have Republicans and non-party affiliates voting for him. And they did.
Yes, the House seat, House seat 87 in Trump's area, was a 10% advantage, 9% advantage in the Senate seat 14. And you're exactly right, Gary. What this shows is what we've talked about many times. They have lost the independent vote, and they're not getting that back between now and in November. The loser of the race here, this Senate 14, said, "Well, and it's going to be another race in November." And she said, "I'm looking forward to running again in a few months." What about between now and November thinks that's going to be a stronger Republican tide? It's going to get worse. Mm-hmm. She barely lost, and I know that's why she thinks she's not going to lose in November. But nothing here is going to make that an easier fight for her in November. Mm-hmm. She'll lose by a bigger margin in November. I promise you that.
They, the Tampa Bay Times ran some articles during early voting showing that the Republicans had greater turnout in early voting. And they said, well, that probably means that just Josie Tomko is going to win this race. And Brian Nathan, who actually won the race, was then asked about it. He said, I've had people that are Republican friends of mine come up and say, I'm a Republican and all 5 of my Republican family members voted for you. So.
And they can see the writing on the wall, the administration can, and that's why they are taking and starting to set into motion these desperate efforts to keep control of Congress And we're going to talk about that in the second half of The Voice of Reason, the efforts that Crooked Donald plans to rig the midterm elections to keep himself from being impeached, convicted, and removed from office and sent to prison, where he belongs for 3 life sentences plus 30 years. Stay with us here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Quick break for news and back with the second half of The Voice of Reason and more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
WTAN Clearwater,
FM 106.1,
WDCF Dade City,
FM 102.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by JTV.com.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. Former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife are set to appear in court in New York this hour for their first pretrial hearing since they were captured by U.S. troops in January. Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, has been running the country since. CBS's Lilia Luciano was in Venezuela this month.
I felt a sense of calm patience, even among Maduro's staunchest supporters, who told me that they trust Rodriguez to continue running the country. They also believe that the deals she is cutting with the United States are going to benefit both countries. And more importantly, they told me, some of his supporters, that they still expect that Maduro will be found innocent.
New developments in the war with Iran. Correspondent Chris Livesay is in Dubai.
Now there are reports that the United States may be preparing a final blow to bring about a definitive end to the conflict, and that it could be prioritizing freeing up the Strait of Hormuz. That's if Iran doesn't open it up itself.
Today, Israel announced it had killed Iran's top naval commander in a bid to reopen the strait. We're hearing more from the Today Show Savannah Guthrie about her mother's kidnapping. Guthrie tells her NBC colleague, Hoda Kotb, she realizes her own fame may have been behind it.
I don't know that it's because she's my mom and somebody thought, oh, that girl, that lady has money. We can make a quick buck. I mean, that would make sense.
Almost 2 months after she vanished, there is still no sign of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie.
And I just say, I'm so sorry, Mommy. I'm so sorry.
We're also hearing from 2 survivors of the deadly collision between an Air Canada jet and a fire truck at New York's LaGuardia Airport.
Rachel Mariotti told CBS Mornings she and Rebecca LaCourie were sitting by the emergency exit.
We didn't know what was going on. We all flung forward.
LaCourie opened the door, allowing many passengers to jump to safety. She can't stop thinking about the 2 deceased pilots.
I just want to find a way to live my life that honors them moving forward.
LaCourie says she won't get on a plane again anytime soon, but Mariotti is flying to Japan today.
Yeah, I feel a little uneasy about it. You have to face your fears at some point.
Michael Wallace, CBS News.
Transgender athletes will be barred from the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. The International Olympic Committee announced this morning eligibility for any female category at the Games or at any other IOC event will be limited to biological females. Gender will be determined by genetic testing. This is CBS News.
Looking for spring jewelry looks? Find them at Jewelry Television. New customers get $20 off purchases of $99 or more at JTV.com.
Sun and Fun is celebrating the red, white, and blue at 52. Join us this April 14th through the 19th as we celebrate America's 250th birthday and 52 years of epic events at Sun and Fun. With the iconic U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds taking over the skies, live country music by Cooper Allen and Thomas Mack.
This ain't her first rodeo.
Day and night air shows, cutting-edge aviation technology, and thousands of Feel the freedom with the whole family. Tickets are free for kids 12 and under, and they'll get inspired by hands-on STEM and aviation activity just for kids. Celebrate America this April in Lakeland, Florida. Get your tickets now at flysnf.org. That's flysnf.org.
Step into the story at the Bay Area Renaissance Festival. Discover all new experiences for the whole family. Set sail for adventure at Buccaneer Bay. Master stealth and speed at the Knights Ninja Challenge. And create enchantment at the Wicked Wand Workshop. Cheer for thundering jousts. Explore shops and games. And bite into the legendary turkey legs. Save on tickets at participating Circle K stores. Or visit BayAreaRenFest.com. The Bay Area Renaissance Festival. Weekends, February 14th through March 29th. Huzzah!
Do you have questions after being injured in a car accident or injured because of someone's negligence? Do you feel overwhelmed or uncertain about the next steps after being injured in a crash? The personal injury attorneys at Peronick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes have been helping their injured clients since 1955 and are now on this radio station to provide guidance to you. Listen to FLA Law each Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Let their decades of experience help you and your family. Offices in Clearwater, non-attorney spokesman.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with The Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Now, the voice of reason continues here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Here again is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
Steve Bannon, who is an enthusiastic advocate of authoritarianism, dropped the mask this week on his War Room podcast while interviewing far-right lawyer Mark Davis. Bannon said plainly what the Trump administration has been dancing and weaving around for months. He propagates the eternal lie that fraudulent voting in America is rampant, and he intends to put a stop to it using the Trump private Gestapo.
We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen.
It's all right out of the authoritarian playbook, isn't it? They always follow sort of the same predictable script. First, you exploit or manufacture a crisis, and you use that to change laws to give yourself more power as you flood public spaces with your militarized enforcers under the cover of helping. Now we're seeing them at the airports. They aren't doing a damn thing but standing around being visible.
Hey, I noticed they took their masks off at the airport,
right.
So why don't they take their masks off on the streets? Unless you're doing something like shooting people in the face and hiding from accountability for that.
And then you normalize it. So you see in stories about ICE brutalizing and killing people, they've gone from the front pages now to just occasional mentions on social media. And finally, you expand it. So ICE has gone national now. We all know that this is the biggest funded operation in the country when it comes to any kind of law enforcement agencies. And what do you have? A bunch of 8th grade dropouts with heavily armed, walking around bullying people. And when they shoot somebody, there's not even an investigation, much less any accountability for what they're doing. And that's becoming the norm, which is what you do in an authoritarian system, to push people around and get your way. And now they've got these databases of protesters being organized. And Trump this weekend came right out and said his next target will be Democrats, whom he called America's greatest enemy, using the Democratic Party slur that Joe McCarthy suggested Republicans should always use. Quote, "Now, with the death of Iran, the greatest enemy America has is the radical left, highly incompetent Democratic Party."
And the problem that Trump has with this authoritarian regime, and it is, we've called it that, and it is. This is authoritarian, dictatorial. It has to be by nature be cruel, which it is. The problem Trump has, it has to be disciplined, and he doesn't have it, nor does his administration have any discipline. So it's going to fail for many reasons, but he's going to keep making threats like that. That will continue. And it's rich for Steve Bannon to lecture us about anything, given he was under a serious felony indictment for fraud when Trump won and then pardoned him. So I don't want to hear anything from Bannon.
I think that it's almost indisputable that he is going to post these guys at the polling places. He's trying frantically to get rid of mail-in ballots because he needs to rig the election so that the Democrats can't get control of Congress.
And let's not forget they've also monkeyed with the rules of the post office on when you actually postmark something, so that until they actually process it, and they expanded the number of days that they have to do that. I think that was solely directed towards mail-in voting in November.
The raid in Fulton County was an effort to create the illusion that the elections are fraudulent. That's what Anna Luna is saying. Oh, nobody trusts the election system anymore. Look, we've got to raid the election offices and recount the votes because they're all cheating.
And we've got rogue sheriffs that are election deniers. There's one in California that went and seized 650,000 ballots from a prior election. So you've got sheriffs who are then, have their independent authority. For years, we just said, stay in your lane, let the elections people run elections, let the sheriffs fight crime on the streets. And now they're saying, oh, well, wait a minute. They're ginned up by all of these lies so that they think that there's some sort of problem with the elections when there's not. But that who knows how many sheriffs around the country are going to go and do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
in
when
November
you
as
mention
well.
ICE, though, and there's this loggerhead now where these TSA employees are not being funded. It's going to need to end. And then the resolution is going to be the separation of ICE from the budget. And what that means is there's going to be, when you talk about this ICE budget, which I think was 18 times. It was absurd. 18 or maybe 30 times the prior budget. Just
It's
absurd.
larger than all of the other law enforcement agencies that the federal government has combined. Larger than the FBI, the DEA, all of those.
Yeah, but what MAGA doesn't want and Trump doesn't want, which is going to happen, but this is going to happen. There's going to have to be a separation to resolve this issue. That I don't care what Trump says, like a child at Christmas. There's going to be a separation of the ICE budget discussion by Congress, and that's going to include addressing what's been happening with these ICE agents, and it's going to affect their budget. They don't want there to be any accountability, but there's going to be a discussion in Congress about this ICE conduct, and it's going to happen, or else this will never get resolved. Again, tomorrow's the third paycheck these TSA agents are not getting. This can't continue. You go to Trump and you can't keep doing this. We've got to resolve these issues. You can't keep just giving us these declarations of what you want.
Well, the Republican plan has not been to address any of the things about, going into people's homes without a real court-issued search warrant, the wearing of masks, the rounding people up, in the streets. Not doing what ICE typically used to do, which was go in and do an investigation, find out, oh, we think that this person lives at this address that's here illegally, and then go to that address with a warrant and arrest them if they don't voluntarily come out.
Gary,
but instead, we're stopping people in the streets and setting up roadblocks and then shooting people, because of the roadblock that we created.
Well, explain to me how, when they're talking about these non-judicial warrants being subject to discussion, they're illegal.
Yeah,
they're debating a point that's illegal. I've signed search warrants as a circuit judge. For them to be debating whether or not it's illegal conduct.
But the Republicans had what they said to the president that he rejected on Sunday was, look, fund all this stuff, and then we'll go back later and fund ICE with the reconciliation bill that we don't need the Democrats to help us with. We have the votes to do that. And so they aren't going to fix any of the problems with ICE, and they're going to get that done. They just wanted to do it separately. And that's when he said, no. I want that Save America Act because I don't want the Democrats doing any investigations of me in the last 2 years of my term.
Yeah, keep in mind there's currently a two-person majority in the House, because of certain other resignations. I'm not sure you've got the majority in the House because there are Republicans, in the House who aren't MAGA people. So, Trump's talking tough as if he's got the votes. Thune, Johnson's just a puppet, but John Thune, who's the majority leader in the Senate, understands he's got a problem here. That's why, he went, as you mentioned, Gary, and they went to Trump with Kennedy and with Cruz on this issue. But Thune understands that Trump is in another world, and it's painful for a guy like Thune who's trying to resolve some of these issues. But there's not going to be a resolution of this, which is going to allow this ICE agent conduct to continue. It's not.
Now, another aspect of authoritarian government is controlling the press, and we see what's going on there. That's already underway. It happened in the Pentagon when they decided that only certain reporters, only right-wing media reporters, could have access to the media offices and the Pentagon. The New York Times sued, and a federal judge sided with them when they challenged this, and the Defense Department announced the removal of all, in response to this, removing the media offices from the building. So throw everybody out and let them work in the parking lot, and then if they come in, they've got to be escorted. They want to control, the Pentagon wants to control what questions are asked of people like Whiskey Pete and never allow them to have a follow-up. So they're trying to take dictatorial control of the message that comes out of the Pentagon so that they control this fire hose of lies that we hear, and a free press ends up getting suffocated. Which is
Contrast that with what happened during the Gulf War. Remember, they would have open press conferences with real media there asking, pointed questions of Colin Powell, who was then, running the military operation. And they answered the questions. It wasn't necessarily all good stuff to hear, but that's the way it is in war. You have good and bad. And as a result, what they're doing now, they're hiding what's going on because it must not be going as well as they say it would be. Otherwise, they'd say, come on in. We got good news to tell you.
Well, what's happening, you're right. And what's happening to you, you're getting some Pentagon leaks. They're conveying that the information is not fully accurate. What's happening. And I don't want to hear this wife-beating alcoholic Hegseth lecture me about patriotism and acting as if you don't buy the line, you're not being patriotic, and attacking the press. I don't want to hear that from you, Hegseth. You're incompetent.
Most of the stuff that comes out of his mouth are war crimes, when he threatens things. And Trump did that as well this week when he said, I'm going to go bomb their electrical infrastructure in Iran. That's a war crime. If you're targeting the civilian populations, that's against the Geneva Convention.
It's amazing for us to say this, but we're seeing things that have never occurred in the 250-year history of this country. Just never. And it's all from Stephen Miller. It's not Trump. We've got a Stephen Miller controlling this White House in a mean-spirited way, a cruel way. The rich get richer, the poor get poor, and the only response to upcoming election, as you said, is anything that might suppress the vote.
And the only opposition is in the courthouse because the whores that represent the Republican Party in Congress won't stand up for the law and the Constitution. Here's another one, Kevin. Last week, a federal judge ordered that the near shutdown of Voice of America was illegal. And he's ordered the government to reinstate more than 1,000 people who were placed on leave from the media organization, which was a big, sharp rebuke to the administration, which has aggressively sought to shrink and remake the Voice of America through the bimbo Carrie Lake, who was the ally of Crooked Donald, who served as CEO of the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Here's what the judge said in a pair of rulings: that Lake's moves to close the agency violated federal administrative law and directed that employees return to work by March 23rd. And he also ordered a resumption of international broadcasting, which the U.S. has used for decades to promote press freedom around the world.
Yeah,
We're telling everybody how to run things and can't do it right here.
I'm confident that in 1 year of this administration, or year and a half, there's been more federal court orders finding administrative conduct illegal than in any 4-year term. I have no doubt about that. There's a very good video I saw this morning. Our good friend Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island. He's on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and if you're up for federal judgeship, you have to go before the committee. And I would urge our listeners to just Google Sheldon Whitehouse and Judicial Committee. He had these 4 nominees. They're young. They put these young. They've got to drink the Kool-Aid. And Whitehouse, he had these 4. They all looked about 30, and Whitehouse is talking to him, and he says, it is none of you will acknowledge that Biden won the election. You're in here you want to be a lifelong tenured federal judge, and yet you can't say certain things that are obvious. You can't admit that there was no fraud in the 2020 election, and the disdain that Whitehouse gave to them. And I'm thinking, we're lawyers, Gary, and I was a judge for a time. They're sitting there and they're just getting this. White House is telling them that you should be embarrassed that you can't have any independent thought here. You're not allowed to say certain things because you've got a script from Trump and Miller that says you better not acknowledge that when you talk to the committee in the Senate.
Yeah, he said, what's going to happen when you become a judge and you have litigants in front of you who are expecting you to give them a fair ruling, an impartial ruling, and you can't even exercise independent judgment to say that the election was, won by the guy who was sworn in.
Just pathetic.
We all remember Tulsi Gabbard. She's been in the news. She was at the raid in Fulton County. She is the director of national intelligence, and to a president waging war on Iran. Now she's using her position to defend Trump's unilateral intervention and the president's recent determination of an imminent threat in Iran seems to be enough for her. Here's what she posted on social media Tuesday from her official government X account. Quote,
There was very little.
Donald Trump was overwhelmingly elected by the American people, and as our commander-in-chief, he is responsible for determining what is and is not an imminent threat, and whether or not to take action he deems necessary to protect the safety and security of our troops, the American people, and our country. And she repeated the argument in the Senate hearing. Now, first of all, Trump was not elected overwhelmingly. He didn't even get 50% of the popular vote. He never has won the popular vote. And she doesn't seem to understand where the responsibility of these decisions or this information lies. So at the Senate Intelligence Committee's 2026 Worldwide Threats hearing, Senator Angus King went straight at CIA Director John Ratcliffe and DNI Tulsi Gabbard, demanding answers on the consequences of all things, climate change.
There was very little, if anything, in the report, in the assessment about climate change, and that's been in past reports. There is a lot of discussion about migration. The estimates are that climate migrants, because of the changes in the climate and the atmosphere, and particularly in the center equatorial area of the Earth, will range from 200 million to 1 billion people by 2050. Do you believe that is a national security threat that should be addressed? The Syrian refugees were about 6 million, and they upset the politics of Europe for several years. We're talking about 200 million to 1 billion people on the move. I believe that's something we should be discussing and that the intelligence community should be assessing. Director Gabbard?
Yes, Senator, there are a number of drivers of things like migration. It would be an extensive and voluminous annual threat assessment if we included every single one. This annual threat assessment is focused, again, on the priorities laid out by the president's national security strategy and on the effects that we can take action, operational action, to protect U.S. interests.
Well, I would suggest combating climate change is something we can take action on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This is serious business.
If you want to,
yeah,
it's just a matter of will.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it just shows how we're going in the wrong direction. We're burning more fossil fuels. It's going to heat up the equatorial region so that more and more people need to leave. He's saying anywhere from 200 million to 1 billion. And where are they going to go? Well, when they leave Central America, they're going to end up here. It's the only place they can survive. And to ignore it and to say that this is all a hoax when we know it's getting hotter every year is not the definition of leadership. You've got to recognize, acknowledge the problems, and deal with them. And as for Trump being elected by an overwhelming majority, don't forget this weekend is the No Kings March. That the last time we had one, there were 7 million people around the country, and it'll probably be more this week.
And they say it's going to be the largest protest in the history of this country in terms of numbers.
Yeah, he won't be trumpeting that accomplishment much, will he?
It's really troubling to think that Tulsi Gabbard, who her entire political career has been an anti-war of choice person, against forever wars, against in particular ever attacking Iran. And yet she's part of the people who will not speak truth to power, will not tell Trump something that he doesn't want to hear. In fact, this week they reported that they're giving Trump a daily video montage of it's almost like a video game update of how things are going in the war. And he's being shown this something you'd show to a teenager, perhaps, if they like playing war games, but he's not getting the nuts and bolts details of what's really happening. And how can you make good decisions if you don't know what's really happening? They sent over a 15-point list of demands essentially for Iran, saying, this is what we expect you to do. And Iran said, we're not taking that. We're not going to do that.
Well, they've also given them fake poll numbers. They tell him that 80% of the public is in favor. They just throw him numbers. He doesn't challenge them at all.
Yeah. And as an authoritarian, he's also dismantled some of the agencies that actually keep our statistics and things that we need to find out about, again, to hide what's really happening around us.
And if I could briefly just change the subject for 1 minute, because this war is a way to avoid the Epstein discussion. If I could just take a second.
Oh, yes.
Because we have to keep an eye on Epstein, which continues to be that this statute that was enacted last November continues to be ignored by the administration. Pam Bondi continues to ignore her obligations under the statute to provide reports. And I think one of the things I want to just mention briefly, Pam Bondi, which we haven't talked much about her today, she is under subpoena to testify before Congress. James Comer chairs the House Oversight Committee, and he was in 5 seconds he was threatening the Clintons with prison if they didn't come testify, and they ultimately did testify. And I thought did a great job. I think it looked embarrassing that the House was trying to make them look bad. They have their warts like all of us do, but they testified honestly. And the hypocrisy with Comer is incredible. Under subpoena, he says, I don't see the real need to threaten Bondi with any type of contempt, as if there's no issue with Bondi testifying. Are you kidding me? I mean, if you drag Hillary Clinton before that committee that has no contact with any of this, other than the fact that Bill Clinton is her husband, Bondi, who committed perjury, by the way, a few weeks ago, before both committees, and yet Comer is saying, oh, there's no need for her to come testify. It just boggles my mind, the hypocrisy.
Bondi was the Attorney General of Florida at the time when the Epstein deal that was cut for him, the sweetheart deal in South Florida that was swept under the rug. She did nothing to investigate him here, nor did Ashley Moody after she became Attorney General. And guess what? James Uffmeyer could be investigating what happened with Epstein here as violations of state law, and none of them are doing it. They're starting to investigate. I saw where New Mexico, the state attorney general there is now doing an investigation into Epstein. He had a 10,000 acre ranch in New Mexico where he was, diddling young, there, and they're fine. And the feds never, ever went there to look at anything. So this whole thing has been a whitewash from the beginning. It's been swept under the rug everywhere. And it's time for people to, if they really want to find out what's happening, why aren't they investigating or subpoenaing the people that were his chefs on the island, the people that were the housekeepers? They know who was there.
Know what's going on.
They have all the dirt. But nobody wants to even go down that road because it's going to result in important and very rich people having a lot of explaining to do about their conduct.
That's why all the porters on the trains 100 years ago were black people, black guys, right? Because they knew what hanky-panky was going on the train runs from New York to Chicago. They were never going to spill it, right? It was never going to work its way back to the wives that the guys were cheating on.
Well, this is a cover-up.
It's the same thing.
Pam Bondi needs to be before that committee, for them to whine about, throwing Hillary Clinton in jail, when she has nothing to do with this, and they're ignoring this subpoena that's been out to Pam Bondi for weeks. Get her before those committees. Don't be a hypocrite.
And can't Congress find her in contempt? Of course, if it was under Democratic control. And couldn't they put her in jail for not producing the documents that she was supposed to produce back in December 19th?
Well, they'd have to send the U.S. Marshals, and guess who controls the U.S. Marshals?
There's also
Bondi.
It's also a felony to lie to a congressional committee, which he's already done. She's gonna get before a committee, whether it's today or when we take over the House in November. But she's going to have to be accountable for this cover-up, and it is a cover-up.
It is, and I was going to say that Trump holds himself up, or at least some of the right-wing hate radio commentators do, as the world's greatest negotiator, a master negotiator. He can't negotiate a settlement in Iran. He can't negotiate a settlement with TSI. He can't settle anything.
They keep asking, when is it going to be over? And when you kick over a hornet's nest, the hornets decide when it's over.
That's true.
Well, if I were a Republican running for re-election in November, as I've said before, I don't know what I would go to the podium and brag about. I mean, nothing is going well for Republicans, and then to me, this war is just an act of desperation. When anything else fails, let's drop a bomb somewhere. But that doesn't end well either.
And the intelligence failures are starting to show that. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago, remember there was a military operation where we were trying to help in Ecuador, and they had film footage of this bomb going off. Yesterday it was, and that was supposedly to target a drug operation, narco-terrorists. And yesterday it was reported that what they ended up bombing and setting on fire was just a farm. It wasn't. Yes. It had nothing to do with drug running whatsoever. But that's concerning that our intelligence is that poor, because we've gotten rid of all the experts. We've purged all the people in the intelligence agencies that were lifelong intelligence folks, and we've replaced them with these Trump loyalists.
And before we go to break, I spotted this. The Trump administration has made it cheaper for U.S. farmers to hire immigrant laborers on temporary H-2A visas after its policy of immigration raids and mass deportations caused a farm workers shortage. Administration officials said last year that the crackdown would lead to higher wages and a 100% American workforce. Don't we call that inflation? Because when you have higher wages, you end up with wage inflation. Powell knows enough not to lower interest rates because he's trying to stave off the inflation that's going to be caused by the higher fuel prices and all the consequences of that. And here Trump, who doesn't know anything about economics, wants him out so he can lower it and exacerbate it even more.
But it's incredible the war that Trump continues to fight about Powell. Powell is going to be leaving beyond the chair, leaving the entire body. But he's because he wants control of the interest rates. He has this fixation on Powell that just can't go away, which is completely illogical.
Yeah.
And one more thing about the farmers, not only have they had no workers, now they're not going to have any fertilizer because all the fertilizer comes through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
And so that's going to affect prices of food.
You mentioned that Strait of Hormuz issue is creating a global economic crisis.
Oh, yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Ed Golly with Gary Gibbons, Kevin Carey. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hear about some of the chaos in the Department of Justice and what that's all about, along with more of the issues the conservatives never want you to hear about.
Hey everyone, it is Brandy Joy with the Brandy Joy Joyride. Feel free to hop in and have a good time with us every Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. This show is brought to you by One Unit, dedicated to bringing people together, letting your voices be heard, and of course we're here to entertain you, upbuild you, inspire you, and even hear from you. It's every Thursday. Tune in to 106.1 FM, Brandy Joy Joyride, and we will hear from you and let's have some fun.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Did you notice? Nothing's the way it used to be. Look at this. Hash browns in a sleeve. Spring-loaded waffles. Orange juice in a box.
At Village Inn, we serve old-fashioned breakfast, the way you remember it, like blueberry pancakes, fluffy omelets, even bacon and eggs.
What do you know? Eggs from a chicken.
Village Inn, breakfast like you like it, anytime you want.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
It's time for Poll Watch now, where we find that nearly 1 in 3 Americans voted by mail in 2024, down from a high of 43% in 2020 because of that pandemic issue. Still, polls show that 58% of Americans support vote by mail as an option for all voters. And as far as Crooked Donald's approval ratings, dropped in recent days to its lowest point since he returned to the White House, hit by a surge in fuel prices and widespread disapproval of the war he launched on Iran. This is a Reuters Ipsos poll. The 4-day poll completed Monday showed 36% of Americans approve of Trump's job performance, down from 40% in a poll conducted the previous week by the same group. Last week, Trump was 40% approval, 58% disapproval, which put him 18 points underwater. This week, 36 approve, 62% disapprove. It's gone from 18 points to 26 points underwater, an 8-point net drop in a single week. Look at the trend lines. Holy Trumpian meltdown, Batman. Whoa. And you think he's not desperate? He's going to do anything he can to keep control of Congress. Well, the Department of Justice, operating under the Crooked Donald regime, is proving to be the poster child for government incompetence, mainly because experienced, competent, patriotic lawyers refuse to be mixed up in the criminal enterprise known as the Justice Department. Let's hear former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice, Liz Oyer, explain exactly what the chaos is all about.
A federal judge in New Jersey absolutely torched the Department of Justice in court this week. He ejected a prosecutor from his courtroom, said they can't be trusted, and even accused them of committing crimes. I have never seen anything like it in 22 years of practice. The issue that arose in court this week related to the management of the New Jersey U.S. Attorney's Office, which prosecutes all federal crimes in that state. The office has been in chaos since last year because Donald Trump and Pam Bondi keep installing unqualified people to lead the office without following the process that is clearly required by law. Initially, Trump appointed Alina Habba, a member of his golf club and one of his personal lawyers, but a judge found that her appointment was illegal and ousted her. Then Pam Bondi appointed a group of 3 lawyers, including Todd Blanche's 30-year-old chief of staff, to run the office together. But the court found that this was also illegal. Now it is unclear who is in charge of the New Jersey U.S. Attorney's Office. On top of this chaos, the judges in New Jersey have lost patience with the prosecutors in the office because they keep failing to comply with court orders. One senior leader of the office was forced to admit to more than 50 violations of court orders in just 60 days, which is unheard of. So needless to say, tensions are running high. This week, things really hit the fan. In a hearing before Judge Zahid Qureshi, a prosecutor was asked some basic questions about who is currently in charge of the office. The prosecutor could not answer, which did not make the judge happy. Then the prosecutor's supervisor started interrupting. The judge told him to stop talking, but he didn't. And then the judge blew his top. He ejected the supervising attorney from the courtroom, and then he went on a tear. He said, quote, "You have lost the confidence and the trust of this court. You have lost the confidence and the trust of the New Jersey legal community, and you are losing the trust and confidence of the public." He also said that the government was potentially violating the Constitution because of, quote, "this unlawful conduct that you guys keep perpetrating in your office." This is a pretty stunning accusation from a federal judge against federal prosecutors. Judge Qureshi has now ordered 3 senior DOJ officials to appear in his courtroom to testify under oath about what is actually going on. Obviously, this chaos and dysfunction is terrible for the justice system, but the good news is that the judges in New Jersey are demanding accountability, which is exactly what we need to get back on track. I will keep you posted.
Ed, discussing the federal and the DOJ and the federal courts, there was a very important oral argument for the U.S. Supreme Court this week, and they hear quite a few cases on their docket. This case was Republican National Committee, RNC versus Michael Watson, who was the Secretary of State of Mississippi. So it's basically RNC versus Mississippi. Had to do with we talked earlier about mail-in voting and whether or not you should count votes that are after the date of the election date. And Paul Clement, who was the RNC counsel, argued, he's a very good lawyer. And what this gives a few minutes to talk about this. It gives us an opportunity to see what's happening with this court. There are now basically 3 camps on this court that are evolving under this Trump administration. It's very interesting to see how it works. The first camp is Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas. And they will pretty much do whatever Trump wants them to do. But the specific issue here that they argued, and Gorsuch made a point that election day is election day. It must be that day. And he even Gorsuch from the bench talked about you have, Independence Day and you have Labor Day. It's a day. Well, the problem with that argument, as was responded to, is you have pre-election voting, which is not part of this case. So to argue that it should be a day is silly because there's voting which the public supports well before Election Day, and on top of that, Clement was faced with the argument, which is somewhat hypocritical, what he's now arguing, which was 25 years after Gore v. Bush. He argued that we want these post-election day votes counted because they felt like, and it I think happened, that these military votes coming in after the election day would be for Gore, and that, as you know, that was a very tight election. So, and then you've got, I think you've got the progressive wing of Sonia Sotomayor, Kenyatta Jackson, and Elena Kagan, who you can count on to say from a fair perspective here. And again, I want to be clear: we as progressive, we're not trying to cheat here. We're saying this is what the law provides. And Mark Elias, who's the primary attorney supporting, has over 60 cases right now, just trying to support these laws and allow there to be fair voting. So what you're left with, the intrigue, and if you like to observe the court, is what's happening with this third wing, which is Roberts, Barrett, and Kavanaugh, because they're the three most important judges on this court right now, and that can vary. I mean, they're Kavanaugh from time to time, and I think Coney Barrett, from our perspective, really is the one who's driving perhaps some opportunities for us to get some victories here. And I believe, based upon the questioning of what occurred on Monday, that there's a fair chance that we may win this issue, and that there will continue to be allowance of these mail-in, post election day coming in that were postmarked apparently the day of the election, but came in, which again is very common. This is not an odd concept. And Mark Elias further made the point that many states have what's called a verification process, and that by definition occurs, post midnight of election day. Trump has this fixation on it ending on midnight of election night because he went to bed thinking he had won the 2020 election, and all these votes came in legally, and he lost. So he's fixated now on this. But if the court does rule either 5-4 or 6-3 in support of mail-in, that will be a victory. If they rule the other way, which they could be 5-4 the other way, based on perhaps Kavanaugh and Roberts, as well as we talked about Barrett, they're going to attack pre-election day mail-in voting next. This is not just one case in a vacuum. There are going to be other cases that the RNC has teed up on this issue to try and limit the votes that will be counted.
Yeah, the irony of this is that the Republican Party used to think that voting by mail was the best thing to do. And the Democrats were slow to catch up on it. And the Democrats have now embraced it wholeheartedly because if you have to vote on one day, okay, you may be sick that day, you may be traveling somewhere that day, you may have to work, and you may not be able to get off and vote. There would be definitely longer lines, harder to vote. And so states recognized, because we've always run the elections but state by state, they recognize that people really like this early voting period, where you don't have to go to your own precinct. You can go to a library anywhere in the county and vote, for any of those races that are in early voting. And voting by mail, especially if you have a long ballot, with the way Florida is, we have all these constitutional amendments that we always put on the ballot. You may have 10 constitutional amendments. Gives you a chance to actually read them and go and look up what it's about and do a little homework. Or if you look at a name and you go, I don't know any of these people in this race, rather than skipping over it, you can actually go and learn about who to vote for if you really care. And I pulled up the supervisor of elections for the District 14 special election that happened on Tuesday of this week. And vote by mail was the highest in both Republicans and Democrats of all the votes cast in that. It exceeded the number of early votes and exceeded the number of election day votes. So people like it.
Well, Gary, you make some very good points. One, it's a state by state analysis. They want to, the MAGA people want to make this a nationalistic thing, and as you just said, it's very popular. People want the opportunity to vote other than just on election day. And thirdly, there's been no evidence of fraud based upon this.
Right.
It's working. It's popular. It's funny how Trump complains about Florida or DeSantis, and there's a committee to address fraud. And we've had the cleanest elections anywhere in Florida. There's been no issue in Florida, so it's not going to go away. But what these Republicans and the MAGA people are doing is say we cannot win these elections unless we somehow minimize the number of people that can vote. If we expand the number of voters, we're going to lose. So this fraud is just a red herring on that point.
And you have to sign the outside of your mail-in ballot, and then they verify that signature. And if it doesn't match, they send you a notice that's saying, we're not going to count your ballot unless you come in and prove to us that this was your ballot.
Yeah.
So there are backups here to make sure that things happen the way they're supposed to happen.
Yeah,
so,
it's a provisional ballot.
Yeah.
Right. It's if we haven't
But
thought
you
through
can
this
cure
process.
the problem if you do so within a certain amount of time. Like 48 hours after the polls close, you can go back in and say, yeah, I mailed my ballot in. My signature is worse because I broke my arm and I had to sign with my left hand. Stuff like that happens to people.
We asked Democratic gubernatorial candidate David Jolly what he could accomplish if he was elected and still had to serve with a predominantly Republican legislature. And he said, well, the first thing I would do is fire Ladapo. Or is it Ladapo? I think is the Surgeon General of the state of Florida. Well, another thing I think he should do right away is take down those stupid signs on the interstate that say, welcome to the free state of Florida, because it's not a free state. And I'll give you an example. I just spotted this the other day. Miami Beach, South Miami, Pinecrest, and Key Biscayne enacted bans to ditch gas-powered lawn equipment like leaf blowers and chainsaws because they're noisy and they pollute a lot. Those little small two-cycle engines
they're
are
horrible.
highly exactly. On Monday, our crooked governor, Ron DeSantis, signed the Florida Farm Bill that strips local governments of the ability to regulate the use of gasoline-powered equipment beginning in July. He says it's not the government's role to decide what people, whether or not they use gasoline-powered tools. He says it's your decision. Well, obviously, he's getting some kind of a kickback for this, but what he's also saying is, I won't allow communities the freedom to decide how they want to live, whether it's a tree cutting ordinance or the number of tourists that can land in Key West on any day. He is the most oppressive governor I ever remember. And of course, he jumped right on women's reproductive rights as soon as Roe Wade was overturned. So
he wants to ignore school boards. They're independently elected and just dictate what school boards can do, what books are going to be on the shelves.
And he shook down the mayor of Tampa a couple of weeks ago with the issue over cooperation between the local police and ICE with respect to rounding up illegals. And she backed down right away. Yeah, she knew he'd throw her out of office.
His second favorite pastime after playing golf is removing elected officials, that have been properly elected by people in a particular jurisdiction, like Andrew Warren, for example.
So if you want to live in a free state, vote Democratic. Now, another thing he's doing is he's trying to promote civics education in class in the public school rooms, because they assert that the sad reality is that only 2 in 5 Americans can correctly name the 3 branches of government, and more than a third of Americans can't name any of the rights guaranteed by the First Amendment, which makes it easy to take them away. You don't even know you have them, right? And so they're jumping all that. But he says that DeSantis says it's time that we need to do a much better job of educating our students in civics, which I can't argue with that. But a part of that curricula revision is to teach them about communism and teach them the horrors of communism. And I rather doubt it's going to be taught in the framework that Marx identified it and what he was trying to accomplish it when he first came up with this whole idea of the workers being able to get more of the value from their work instead of the wealthy people that had the money to start the factories and so on.
But no doubt
with the lyrics that have personal
another
meaning.
guy
You've
said,
come home to an old friend, the music of your
what
life
happened?
on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Are we done? Oh, okay.
No doubt. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, a guy wrote a letter few weeks ago, and he says what they really need to be teaching is fascism, because that's where we're heading in this country, and
Right.
students need to recognize what it is and how it can affect them if we lose our republic
Yes.
it evolves into a fascist oligarchy.
Well, that's toward what I was about to say. I think DeSantis' view of civics would be his view of civics.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be politicized, and you can't have anything in there that would make you feel bad about what we did in our history. And would they teach, instead of just the three branches of government, would they talk about the unitary executive theory of the executive branch, that they could get to control independent federal agencies like the FCC, the FEC, and the SEC? That's what Trump wants to do. He wants to ignore all that and say, I'm in charge of everything. Would that be what we'd be teaching now?
Yeah.
No question, it would be his version of civics, which would be very, very narrow version of civics.
This week is also the anniversary of the fire in New York, and the factory that made the waist collars or whatever. I can't remember exactly the name of the shirtwaist factory fire, where something like 143 people had to jump out of a sixth floor window in New York when the place caught on fire, because the exits were locked, because the owners of the business thought the employees might walk off with a spool of thread or something that they manufactured, right? And it laid the foundation for regulations, which conservatives always criticize. They say regulations are job-killing burdens that we need to get rid of. But what they are, in fact, is life-saving implementations by the government to protect workers. And in fact, with all of the things that the Republicans are opposed to, like the 40-hour work week that we got from the Democrats, or Social Security or Medicare, the Affordable Care Plan, laws against child labor, all of these things were opposed by Republicans from the outset. And of course, regulations.
And unions. They're against unions too.
And in spite of that, our economy still had something like 63% in the middle class. We had the strongest economy in the world following the Second World War. How did we do this with all these regulations? And the answer is because we had a safer society to live in, and we had a higher income for the people that worked, so that the economy thrived.
It turns out if you don't make people jump out of the sixth floor window, they're more productive.
And the idea that corporations will self-regulate is absurd, because if that was the case, they would have made sure that the fire escapes were adequate before the government came in and regulated it, right?
It is eye-opening for, you mentioned that all of those statutes that seem commonplace, that they were strongly opposed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
This is just going to increase our costs and decrease our profits. So we have an obligation to the shareholders, and we can't afford to do these things.
And so this legislative session in Florida, there's another union busting bill that requires, at least 50% of the people that are employed by the company to vote to keep the union. Instead of what we've always done is the number of people voting in an election, and it's a majority vote of who votes, not who is employed there. So again, they're trying to tamp down and eliminate unions, except for the police union and the fire unions. All the other public employee unions, including the teachers, they're attacking. So
that's fully correct. You mentioned the middle class. I mean, what's happening now, there's no question about this. The middle class is shrinking in this country. It's shrinking, and what that creates is instability. So you've got the rich people saying we're gonna milk this as much as we can, but at some point we don't want revolution. So we've got to kind of pacify the peasants. But the bottom line is, you mentioned after World War II, you had a growing middle class, housing, opportunities for education, and that's going away. And it's really not going to be helpful. I know that the rich are getting richer, but it's creating a very unstable society.
And Trump is virtually mocking the whole concept of affordability. He's not addressing it as he said he would. He's ridiculing it and saying you don't have a problem with affordability. Yes,
That's
most
because
people.
he has no concept of what it means to go to the grocery store or fill up a car or even drive a car.
Budget a paycheck.
Yeah, and all of the billionaires that he's put in the cabinet. And when's the last time that Howard Lutnick flew commercial anywhere?
Mhm.
These people don't care about what's going on in the airports. They all take private jets wherever they want to fly because they can.
Well, Trump said the affordability crisis is a hoax. His language, a hoax.
And then I spotted a letter here where a guy says that our debt is now up to $39 trillion. Each American now owes $116,700 as our portion of the debt, which increased by more than $31,000 during the Trump administration. This was the guy, you'll recall, who was such a brilliant businessman that he knew how to straighten out government and balance the budget and promised he would never sign a budget that wasn't balanced. And instead, in his first administration, he added another $8 trillion to the debt.
And that's before he kicked over the hornet's nest.
Mm-hmm. And now our just the interest to service that debt is a fifth of the money that the Treasury takes in every year, and it's growing. What other possible result can we end up with than bankruptcy as a nation?
Well, the government's not functioning. The Congress isn't functioning, and they're not making the hard decisions that need to be made. It's immoral to impose that debt on future generations.
They are talking a little bit about Social Security finally and addressing that because they realize that's going to be adjusted, and they're probably going to do something before the trust fund runs out. But we'll just wait and see what happens. It's time for our quote of the day. Today it's from Joan Rivers. She said, "All my mother told me about sex was that the man goes on top and the woman on the bottom. For 3 years, my husband and I slept in bunk beds." Anyway, we'll be back next Thursday morning at 9 o'clock for another edition of The Voice of Reason. My co-hosts Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey. I'm Ed Golly, and I'm reminding you that if the statement seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because a conservative said it.
Make them prove it.
WTAN Clearwater,
FM 106.1,
WDCF Dade City,
FM 102.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
Steve Kathan, a day in court for the former president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. It comes months after they were rounded up by U.S. troops and ahead of a drug trafficking trial. CBS's Katrina Kaufman in New York.
The core issue that we're going to hear about today, will the Venezuelan government be allowed to pay these legal fees? Could this case be dismissed, an outcome that I think is very unlikely, or potentially this judge may call for an evidentiary hearing to look further into whether or not Maduro actually has the resources to pay his own legal fees.
President Trump's holding his first cabinet meeting today since the war in Iran began.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. And anybody that saw what was happening over there would understand why they want to make a deal.
This morning on social media, he warned Tehran to get serious soon in talks to end the war. CBS's Holly Williams.
There's speculation that the U.S. could use ground troops to seize control of Iran's Karg Island, through which the Iranians export around 90% of their oil. Now, that would pile more economic pressure on the Iranian regime. But one big question is whether the Iranian leadership would rather do a deal for their survival or die fighting.
A Washington deal to pay TSA workers remains elusive, and that means no relief for travelers in long security lines. CBS's Shauna Mizell.
Things here at Houston's Bush Airport are slow but steady. Even though things are moving, it's certainly not fast enough for some passengers. The wait time here right now is actually at 240 minutes. These passengers are angry, they're frustrated, they're even tired, but a lot of them are coming as prepared as they can.